What's going on, guys? This is the Red Rogue, and today we'll be continuing on with the guide series for rogues in the Shadowlands Pre Patch. Up next, we'll be looking over all the changes that Assassination has gone through, as well as some general recommendations for talents, gearing, stat optimization, and a couple tips I have here and there. So let's take a look and see what things are like for Assassination so far in the Pre Patch. As a bit of precaution, this information is all quite new and can be somewhat, volatile, let's put it that way. As I generally try to mention in any and all videos going over new things and changes, it is always best to simulate any changes you plan on making to your gear, talents, Azerite Armor, Azerite Essences, and who knows what else. If you watched my pre-patch Outlaw video, then you'll understand the order I'll be talking about everything in. The video should also be individually segmented to each part I'll be discussing in case you want to hop around to particular things. Assassination has seen basically the smallest amount of changes in the pre-patch of the 3 specializations of Rogue, so we'll go over the new abilities added first. Ambush has been added to the Assassination Rogue toolkit, and I'm honestly not entirely certain yet if this will have some massive, long-reaching implications or impact on the assassination rotation or anything like that. But outside of using the revised blindside talent, I think that you'll still be using Mutilate more than Ambush, mainly because you can only generate 3 combo points on a critical hit due to Seal Fate with Ambush, whereas with Mutilate you can generate up to 4. Slice and Dice has made its return as a class-wide maintenance finishing move, and is no longer just an Outlaw Rogue talent. This will increase your attack speed by 50% while active, so you'll want to maintain this buff at all times, except maybe in some scenarios where you have like a really big trash pull of over 5 targets. Slice and Dice, unfortunately, kinda just feels like an extra maintenance move on top of all the other buffs and debuffs we work with as Assassination, and doesn't really have any true synergy with the resource management of the spec like it does with Subtlety and Outlaw. It's still an obviously noticeable DPS gain due to the extra auto attacks and deadly poison procs, so it is good to keep up. For brand new talents, we have one that will be taking the place of Toxic Blade on the level 45 talent row. Alacrity, which is a stacking haste buff you earn from spending combo points, has made its way into the Assassination Rogue toolkit. And ironically, just like with Outlaw, this talent row is now quite weak for alternatives, so Alacrity is looking to be our best option at the moment. For changed abilities, there have been a few minor things we'll be seeing in the pre-patch as Assassination. We'll start with talents, as there's a couple things to bring up here. The blindside talent has been reworked. It now makes your mutilates have a 20% chance to make your next ambush free to use and can be used outside of stealth. The chance is doubled to 40% when your target is below 35% health. The old version was actually an entirely separate move, so this just works as a simple passive proc effect, somewhat similar to the effect that opportunity procs have for Outlaw. This currently is simming less than elaborate planning in single target, at least for my testing, so I can't say how well this will perform for you. It will most likely have little to no benefit in multi-target situations, especially when compared to elaborate planning once again, because you have to mutilate for this to proc the free ambushes, which you're not really using that many mutilates if you're in an AoE situation. Venom Rush has received a slight buff, and it's still the worst talent option on the level 45 row, again from my own simulations that I've been running. It gives 8 energy back now instead of 5 when you mutilate a poisoned target, so it's technically a 60% improvement over the old version, but it's still not very good. Lastly for talents, Crimson Tempest has had a target cap put on it. A vast majority of moves have had target caps put on them in preparation for Shadowlands, so this doesn't come as much of a surprise to me. It is now only able to hit up to 8 targets, so this is something you'll have to remember and get used to. Speaking of target caps, Phantom Knives has received one as well. This move is also limited to 8 targets. A nice, albeit minor bonus for Assassination is that Vendetta was removed from the GCD. This won't really have any huge implications to the rotation or changing how you use it, but it's nice to have more moves removed from the GCD. Lastly, for changed abilities, we have Shiv returning as a PvE baseline move for all 3 specs of Rogue. This will eventually become the new Toxic Blade as we level through Shadowlands, but the bonus nature effects damage percent doesn't unlock until level 58. For now, it's simply a combo point generator on a 25-second cooldown that costs 20 energy. This will deal a minor amount of damage, as well as inject an empowered version of your currently active non-lethal poison into your foe. For pre-patch, the only non-lethal poison we'll have access to is crippling poison, so casting Shiv on a target while crippling poison is your active non-lethal poison will cause the enemy to be slowed by 70% for 5 seconds, instead of the normal 50% for 12 seconds. For removed abilities, Toxic Blade is no longer a talent option. This was removed from the game and replaced with Alacrity, due to the rank 2 Shiv effect we will unlock as we level through Shadowlands. This is a bit unfortunate, as Toxic Blade was a pretty popular talent option prior to the super crazy high Haste, Bleed, Exsanguinate build that we saw during patch 8.3 with the corruption system. Now that we've gone through all the changes, we'll start looking at ideal things you can be using as of what I've seen through some preliminary simulations that I've been trying to do. We'll go over talents first, which should be pretty quick since not too much has changed, but I'll go over each section to the best of my ability and explain why each talent is ideal. For the level 15 talent row, Elaborate Planning is showing to be the strongest overall choice in single target and multi-target situations, simply because it's a flat gain to all damage regardless of what you're doing as long as you use a finishing move to proc the ability. Master Poisoner and Blindside are pretty comparable to each other in single target, both simming virtually identical, with my personal loadout being about 2.5% lower than Elaborate Planning. In AoE though, Master Poisoner is marginally better than Blindside, which isn't too surprising since ambush procs are more beneficial in single target situations, whereas the free passive poison damage is simple, guaranteed DPS. Blindside is probably the most fun talent of the three in my opinion, as passive damage buffs are kinda banal and Blindside at least gives you a proc in your rotation. On the level 25 row, this shows a pretty obvious winner in terms of damage, though this can just be from my gear choices, because all three of these options could have some potential usage. Night Stalker allows for some hard-hitting ruptures to be used from Vanish Cast, whereas Master Assassin gives a hefty 50% crit chance bonus whenever you come out of stealth or vanish. From my personal setup though, it looks like Subterfuge will still be the primo talent of choice for the three by a pretty sizable amount of damage. Again, always check for your own character, but that's what I'm seeing as the clear winner of the three. Master Assassin might be nice for doing world content or leveling though, since our Azerite Armor won't work once we actually get into Shadowlands. The level 30 talent row has favored Vigor for quite a while, as Assassination is historically a pretty slow spec, so the extra energy and energy regen is a nice benefit. However, in patchwork-style simulations, all three are basically identical in my loadout, so you should be able to have a pretty even choice available to you. For me, Marked for Death is simming a couple percent higher than Vigor in dungeon slice style encounters, so again your mileage may vary, or you may prefer an easier playstyle that doesn't have to involve spamming Marked for Death on things to get the most possible DPS out of it. The level 35 talent row is virtually unchanged, so Leeching Poison is still a great option for soloing and world content due to the extra survivability that the healing offers. Cheat Death is my go-to talent for nearly all content, as it allows for cheesing of mechanics and the occasional goof up. And Elusiveness is a solid pick for those who like to mitigate their damage by effective usage of the Feint ability. The level 40 talent row is focused mainly on utility benefits, so the choice will come down to your preference and the content you're doing. Internal Bleeding is the only direct damaging move of the tier, making your kidney shots now apply a bleed as well. I've personally never cared for it too much, though it might be something worth trying for world content or leveling if you plan on stunning your targets often while fighting. Iron Wire is my favorite of the three, mainly because we're already casting a lot of garrotes on numerous targets. This causes your targets to be silenced by an additional 3 seconds when you cast Garrote on them from stealth, or with the Subterfuge talent enabled, so it can be an extremely potent option in Mythic Plus or PvP. The fact it also makes the target deal less damage is a very nice perk as well. Lastly, Prey on the Weak is a good option if you plan on bursting something down during a stun, so again, good PvP applications and in Mythic Plus where you're more likely going to run into stunnable enemies in comparison to raid encounters. The damage bonus also helps anybody in your group or anybody that's on your arena team or whatever, so it actually helps the whole group when you do it, so that's kinda nice. The level 45 talent row is unfortunately a virtually uncontested matchup of Alacrity versus Venom Rush and Exsanguinate. Venom Rush is by far the worst talent basically to ever exist, and I don't even know if that's an exaggeration. If it were possible to lose DPS from a talent, this would be one of the ones that could probably do it. Exsanguinate, on the other hand, was actually quite strong during the heavy haste stacking we could do prior to the release of the Shadowlands Pre Patch with the Bleed build. As of now though, it's simming quite unfavorably in my current setup. Alacrity, on the other hand, is just a reliable and consistent haste buff that is easy to work with and non-engaging in the slightest, but it is the best choice of the bunch. Lastly, the level 50 talent row is showing something really interesting, at least for my gear. Crimson Tempest is actually a very slight DPS gain in single target over Poison Bomb. Yeah, kinda weird, and it's only by a very tiny amount, but yeah. Between the 3 talents though, they're literally all within like 30 DPS of each other in single target, so you do have some leeway there. For AoE though, Crimson Tempest is the clear winner of the 3. Poison Bomb has the benefit of being a passive that you really don't have to pay much attention to, and Hidden Blades is kinda the odd man out as it requires a tiny bit more planning than the other 2, while not really dealing any more damage in any scenario. While there is some synergy with the Echoing Blades Azerite trait, that trait appears to be definitely undertuned compared to how it was prior to the pre-patch. Speaking of Azerite traits, let's go over those next. With the stat squish, things have gotten kinda weird in this aspect. A lot of class-specific traits are generally not looking as strong as they were prior to the stat squish, though of course we'll still have to use at least 3 of them since your outer ring of Azerite traits is only class-specific ones. Shrouded Suffocation is simming very well in multi-target aspects, and in single target it's still pretty good, Double Dose being only slightly better. Since Double Dose isn't useful at all in AoE though, you could honestly just run multiple Shrouded Suffocations, though again I always recommend simming your own gear loadouts to see what works best for what you have and what you want to use. For generic Azerite traits, there are quite a few that come from dungeons that are looking pretty strong, such as Clockwork Heart, Swirling Sands, and Blightborn Infusion. Heart of Darkness is of course still a great option and is the easiest of the bunch to stack multiple of, as it's on literally every piece of raid gear from Nyalotha, and it also comes from any Azerite armor you get from your Horrific Vision runs. They also removed the corruption requirement needed before, so literally it's just free stats, which is pretty nice. I was surprised to see how much lower Echoing Blades was simming in AoE, but I think that might have just been a partial casualty to the scaling down that we've seen that has affected a variety of traits. Overwhelming Power is still a great minor Azerite trait, but again, check through your gear and see what you have and what you can make work for your loadout. For Azerite Essences, you should always run simulations of various combinations to see what performs best as well as what playstyle you enjoy the most. For major essences in Dungeon Slice Sims, the reset kill playstyle of things with Breath of the Dying and Marked for Death might be an option you want, or you can have something simple and predictable like Essence of the Focusing Iris. Due to our somewhat limited time frame to use and earn these essences, you might not be able to get mathematically the best option before the expansion's over if you don't already have them all unlocked and ranked up already. For a single target, Condensed Life Force from the Eternal Palace raid is showing to still be a very strong contender for the best essence. For minor essences, the choices are still pretty predictable from what I can tell. Memory of Lucid Dreams is an exceptionally strong minor essence and helps smooth out the rotation due to the energy cost refund, and also gives versatility procs and self-healing too, which are fantastic. Crucible of the Flame, for some reason, has gone through some weird scaling with the stat squish, and is an exceptionally strong minor essence at the moment. Breath of the Dying is still a solid free DPS gain, as is Conflict and Strife if you have rank 3 of it. Next, we'll talk stat priorities. With the pre-patch, many stat itemizations have changed quite a bit. As a forewarning, these secondary stats can change very quickly based off your gear loadouts, the type of content you're in, like if it's patchwork or dungeon slice simming, or just your loadout in terms of trinkets, Azerite Essences, Azerite traits, and all that. So this list is a very, very preliminary and rough idea of what you can start using for now. Honestly, even for my own gear, it doesn't quite line up with the stat priority I'm gonna give you, so definitely sim yourself on this part. For Assassination, we'll be looking at Agility as our top stat, followed by Versatility, then Critical Strike, then Mastery, and finally Haste. Of course, as I've reiterated several times, always simulate your own character to see what you're missing out on, and ideally use the top gear feature if possible and if you're using raid bots. The order of stats should give you a pretty good starting point as of now though. Lastly, I figured I'd go over some pointers and general tips to keep in mind. When using the Subterfuge talent, all your Garrotes cast from stealth and for 3 seconds after breaking stealth are considered empowered, meaning they do way more damage than they would if you weren't running the talent or were using them during your normal rotation out of stealth. What this means is that you want to make sure these are not being refreshed, because refreshing them with a regular Garrote means they'll no longer be the empowered version. This is the same when using the Night Stalker talent, which should ideally be spent on a full combo point Rupture. The Pandemic Refresh is a very important concept to learn as a class that deals in damage over time like Assassination. What this means is that if you refresh a move with another copy of that move, up to 30% of the original duration will carry over and be saved onto the new version of the move. So we'll use Garrote as an example. Garrote has an 18-second duration. When Garrote reaches 5.4 seconds, it will be at 30% of 18. This is ideally when you want to refresh it, so that extra 5.4 seconds will roll into your new Garrote, resulting in one that's slightly more than 23 seconds in duration. Remember though, it's based off the original duration of the move, so that doesn't mean you can refresh the 23-second version of it and gain even more and more pandemic refreshes, since the Garrote was still only technically 18 seconds long but had stuff added to it. This rule also applies to Rupture and Slice and Dice, and that duration will fluctuate based on the combo points you spent on it. That's why you ideally want to refresh at the full combo point value, so it will consistently carry over the longest amount of pandemic refresh possible. The only time you shouldn't be refreshing a Garrote or a Rupture or something like that is if it's an empowered version either by the Night Stalker or Subterfuge talents, unless you're still in that Subterfuge 3-second window and are refreshing it with another empowered Garrote or something along those lines. For cooldown usage, you ideally should always be using your Vanish and Vendetta at the same time. This works very nicely with the stealth-oriented talent row, as Night Stalker, Subterfuge, and Master Assassin will all benefit from lining these two abilities up on each cast. You should ideally pool energy when you're outside of the benefits of Vendetta buffs or other damage boosting windows, as you'll want to ensure you can use as many abilities during that window of opportunity. Assassination is a pretty slow spec to play in terms of actions per minute, but spamming your moves will often result in wasting the damage increase windows that you'll have at your disposal. I hope this gives you a good idea of the changes Assassination has seen, as well as some recommendations for you in the Shadowlands Pre Patch. Mechanically speaking, Assassination really hasn't changed anything at all, which means it'll be a smooth transition for current or returning Assassination Rogues. If you have any other questions or need more explanation on anything from this video or any other topics, don't hesitate to ask. As most of my regular viewers would be able to tell you, I try to answer quite literally anything and everything I get on the channel to the best of my ability. If this video proved useful to you, then any likes, comments, or new subscribers are all fantastically charming things of you to do. If you're new around to my little corner of the YouTube algorithm, then I'd like to welcome you to come check out the rest of the channel. I do new uploads every weekday on a variety of content, with a big emphasis on rogue-specific stuff. As always, I'd like to take a quick moment to thank all of my regular viewers, commenters, subscribers, and especially my patrons for helping make these Shiba Shenanigans possible. Thank you all so much for watching. This is the Red Rogue, and I'll see you guys around.